Hello everyone, Hare Krishna. Thank you for those who have joined on the call, and thank you for those who will be joining later on, will be watching this video. We'll continue our discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. We are on the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and last week we looked until the verses number 17. So we looked at 3 verses. These are kind of the seminal verses, very important verses for the core philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll continue talking about at least 2 to 3 more verses. I'll keep it short today. But then we'll continue our discussions as and when more people are able to join and participate in the conversation. So with that, I'll start with quick prayers and then we'll go into the reading and the explanation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we are looking at the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We have previously seen that Arjuna has asked Krishna that not even asked, actually, he has declared to Krishna that Krishna, I don't know what to do. I'm confused about my duty. I don't want to fight. There are my cousins, my uncles on the other side. I'm feeling compassion for them. I think that this war would lead to negative reactions, karmic reactions, would lead to chaos in the society. If the warriors will die, then the women and the children would be abused, and the entire social structure will fall apart. And more importantly, I can't kill my uncles and my cousins who are such amazing people, who are superiors. So what do I do? I should probably either beg or I should just even give up the entire idea of fighting. So he says that I don't want to fight. I am your disciple and I'm a soul surrendered unto you. So you tell me what to do. Right? I am unable to drive away this grief. Even if I win this kingdom, there would be no enjoyment. So having spoken thus, he said, Krishna, I will not fight. So at that point, Krishna again begins his instructions, his very first instructions to Arjuna. He says that, Arjuna, you are talking like a wise person, but actually you are a fool. Why? Because you are mourning for something that is not worthy of grief, right? So what is that something? What do we mourn for that is not worthy of grief? You are mourning for the body. This body is perishable. This body is going to die at some point in time, and you are not the body. So why are you worrying for the body? Why are you mourning for the body? This body is supposed to be given up at some point in time. So there is really no point in worrying for it. The wise, they don't lament for the living nor for the dead, because they understand that they are going through a transition period. This body is a temporary situation of existence that we are living in. So therefore the wise persons do not care about that. They care about something else. Now what do they care about? He explains it in further. So Krishna says that if you are worried that these people will pass away, then just remember that never was there a time where I did not exist, you did not exist, or all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. That means that you have always existed, Arjuna. You are existing right now and you will continue to exist. The same applies to me, the same applies to all these people in the war. They have always existed, they will continue to exist, they are existing and they will continue to exist. Now the question may be asked that how are they existing, right? We see death happening in front of our eyes. That's where the core difference comes between matter and spirit. That what we see in the world actually is passing of matter. We are unable to see the spirit. The only way we are able to see the spirit is through life symptoms, right? So Krishna explains that this spirit, this soul, actually, you are a soul, and being a soul, being a conscious entity, you are eternal in nature. Just like God is eternal, Krishna is eternal in nature. That's similarly the part and parcels of Krishna, the souls are also eternal in nature. Therefore, Arjuna, don't worry about the body, because the body passes from the boyhood to youth to old age. Similarly, the soul passes into another body at death. Therefore, a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So You see, Arjuna, you are a boy at one point in time, then you became a youth, and then soon you'll become old. Similarly, your soul, which is passed from the body of a child to the body of a young man to the body of an old person, it will pass into the body, another body at the time of death. So a sober person, Dhira, is not bewildered by such a change, right? A Dhira is the same person who doesn't lament for the living nor for the dead. Why? Because the Dhira knows that you change bodies. You are constantly changing bodies. Even Western science, medicinal science also tells us that every 7 years we change. All of the cells of our body are completely renewed in time, right? It goes through cycles such as autophagy, and old cells die, new cells come up, and then we are completely in a new state of body. If we look at our pictures from our childhood, we can see that that body was completely different from the body that we have today. It was a body of a child, right? So the soul has passed on from one body to another body, and similarly, as time progresses, this body will disappear and another body will come up, and the soul will go into that. Therefore, Arjuna, don't worry. Don't worry about the body. Even if you worry about the body, even if you are affected by it, then Krishna gives the second argument that, you know what? The happiness and distress, the appearance of happiness and distress is non-permanent. It comes and it goes. It's like the appearance and disappearance of seasons. Winter comes, winter goes. Summer comes, summer goes. Day comes, day goes. Night comes, night goes. They all come and go. That's the nature of this world. They arise from sense perception. Because you see matra sparsha. Krishna uses the term in Sanskrit matra sparsha. Because you see through your senses. So based on your senses, you are seeing what's happening in the world. And based on your senses, you are thinking that something is a happy, joyous occurrence, something is a distressful occurrence. But it's all happening through your senses. Because of your senses, you are attributing. For example, one event, let's say there is a race, right? Two people are racing. One of them wins the race, the other one loses the race. Now, the person who has won the race, his sense, it's the same event, right? It's the same event. But the person who has won the race, he becomes joyous, he becomes joyful. And the person who lost the race, same event, right? Same outcome. He lost it, the other person won it, he becomes distressed, right? Why? Because it's like appearance and disappearance. They're coming from your sense perception. It's your senses. If you truly see that the race doesn't matter at all, actually, I'm a living entity. It's something temporary in nature, and it comes and it goes, so you won't be affected by it. So Arjuna, learn to tolerate. First, understand that you are not the body, you are a spirit soul. Second, learn to tolerate, because these temporary situations that are affected to the body will come and will go, right? And then finally, then we saw the verses that in continuation of this argument, that a person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is eligible for liberation, right? Liberation, what does liberation mean? Liberation means to get away from the material existence. Material existence is dual, happiness and distress, good and bad, right? So in this dual nature, day and night, positive and negative. So in this dual nature of experience, if you want to get liberated, then you have to be steady in both the situations. That's what liberation means. Liberation doesn't mean that there is a physical activity that happens. Liberation essentially is a change in our consciousness, a change in our understanding, a change in our identification from matter to spirit. That's what liberation is all about. Liberation doesn't mean that there is something magical that happens. It's actually a change and shift in consciousness. That's what Krishna is trying to tell, that Arjuna, don't fight thinking that you are the body and you are identifying with the body. Fight with the idea that you are fighting for dharma, you are doing your duty, and as part of the duty, you are listening to your teacher, to your spiritual master, which is me, and you are standing for righteous, for higher principles. So the same event, it's the change in consciousness. That's what actually liberation is. We change our consciousness, and we change it to such an extent that the change in bodies do not affect us, and at one point in time we stop changing the bodies, because we have completely risen above that material identification of consciousness. So he says that, Krishna says that, don't be disturbed, tolerate and don't be disturbed, be steady. In that state, you are eligible for liberation, because you have already attained that consciousness of a liberated person. Right? So that's why liberation doesn't have to happen after this body. It can happen within the same body. There are people, sages given such as Shukdev Goswami, the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He's a liberated personality while living in the body. There is another example of sage Rishabdev, King Rishabha, who is the father of King Bharata. King Bharata is the person after whom the land of India, Bharat is named. He was a liberated person. There are many, many examples of such great personalities who became liberated even in the body itself. Why? Because they change their consciousness. They move their consciousness from a lower understanding of matter to a higher understanding of the spirit and their true position as a spirit soul. So, as a part and parcel of the divine conscious source. So, Arjuna, don't be disturbed, be steady. And in that state, you are eligible for liberation. Then we saw that Krishna gives a reference. He says that's the seers of the truth, people who know the truth, people who study the truth, people who study logic, people who study truth. They have concluded. What have they concluded? That of the non-existent, that is, non-existent means something that is temporary in nature. The material body, there is no endurance. That means it goes away, dies, it doesn't last. It's the, by the definition of the term, it's non-existent. And of the eternal, there is no change. If something is eternal, then how can it change? It remains forever as it is. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So Krishna says that Arjuna, tolerate, understand that the soul goes from bodies, and understand that the body has always been temporary and can never endure anything. So even if you say that you want to fight, and then you don't kill them, they will be killed by some other point at some other point in time. Similarly, for the soul, eternal being, there is no change. So they have studied the nature of both the existent and the non-existent, and they are telling, so we should listen to these seers of the truth, right? And then finally, the last verse that we saw last time was that with that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. Now, what pervades the entire body, right? We asked that question. How do we know something is pervading the body, and how do we know something is alive? It's the presence of living symptoms, the presence of consciousness. So that which pervades the entire body, that is your conscious presence, is indestructible. Nothing can destroy your consciousness. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. And this consciousness is a symptom of a soul. We see it in plants, we see it in animals, we see it in reptiles, we see it in insects, we see it in viruses. This conscious activity is actually a nature of the soul, and this soul is indestructible. So who are you worrying for? You're thinking about Dronacharya, Bhishma. They are spirit souls. They are not the body. They are indestructible in nature. So why are you worrying, right? And so from that onwards, let's look at next three verses, 18, 19, 20, and then we'll look at the other verses the next time. So verse number 18. So what does verse number 18 say? I'm opening up the Sanskrit. Antavanta ime deha nitya shokta sharirina anashino prameyasya tasmad yudhyasya bharata. Antavanta, perishable. Antavanta, that means something that ends. Ime, all these. Dehaha, material bodies. Nitya yasya, nitya means eternal, eternal in existence. Uktaha, are said. Sharirinaha, of the embodied soul. Anashinaha, never to be destroyed. Aprameyasya, immeasurable. Tasmat, therefore. Yudhyasya, fight. Bharata, O descendant of Bharata. Translation. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata. So now Krishna, building upon his previous arguments, what he's saying? He's saying that the material body, right, this body, matter, of the indestructible. We previously saw the soul is indestructible. It's eternal. It doesn't die. Immeasurable. You can't even measure it, right? Because you don't understand how to measure it. That's why it's immeasurable. Although it is said that the size of the soul is 1/10,000 the tip of the human hair. That's what describes in the Vedic texts, Vedic wisdom. But it's immeasurable from our material senses, material understanding. And eternal living entity. So it's indestructible. Nobody can destroy it. It's immeasurable. You can't measure it with your material understanding. That's why consciousness is so hard to understand with modern mechanisms. People are trying to look into the brain and trying to activate brain functions. But it is said that looking at consciousness in the brain is almost equivalent to looking at the announcer in the radio, right? You don't see the announcer in the radio. Why? Because he's not present there. His symptoms are present through waves. So similarly, looking at consciousness, they are not. You need the right kind of mechanisms to truly understand that. And similarly, there is eternal. It's eternal living entity. So this body will come to an end. The soul won't come to an end, but the body, the material body, is sure to come to an end. So even if it comes to an end, Arjuna, then why are you worrying? They will come. They will die at some point in time. Therefore, what should you do? You should fight. You should fight this battle, right? Prabhupada further explains in the purport that this body is perishable. It goes, we see it happening in front of our eyes. Sometimes it perishes immediately, or sometimes it may do so after hundreds of years, right? It's a question of time only. It happens today or it happens later on. You can't maintain it indefinitely. People who think that we can maintain our body for long, it's not possible, because it's by nature, it's matter. Matter is temporary by the existence, and the spirit soul is indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal. So therefore, nothing is to be killed. You can't kill the spirit soul. It is so small that nobody knows how to measure it, right? So Krishna is saying, don't lament. You are lamenting. But why? What are you lamenting for? They have never been, they are always existing. They are always eternal in nature, right? Therefore, the living entity is the part and parcel of the Supreme. And as the sunlight maintains, so the light of the soul maintains this body. And as soon as this body leaves, this conscious entity leaves the body begins to decompose and it dies. Therefore, Arjuna, fight, not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations, right? Fight for the ultimate cause of true religion, true dharma, that you have to establish these dharmic principles, and you have to do your duty of a kshatriya, and you have to know that what these Kauravas are trying to do, you have to stop them. They are otherwise they will pursue, they will follow along with their evil mindedness and their evil plans. So Arjuna, don't be affected by temporary material bodily considerations. You have to do your duty, right? So that's verse number 18. Verse number 19. Ya enam veti hantaram yaschenam manyate hatam ubhau tau na vichanito nayam hanti na hanyate. Yaha, anyone who, enam, this, veti, knows, hantaram, the killer, yaha, anyone who, cha, also, enam, this, manyate, thinks, hatam, killed, ubhau, both, tau, they, na, never, vijanitaha, are in knowledge, na, never, ayam, this, hanti, kills, na, nor, hanyate, is killed. So what is Krishna saying? Neither he who thinks the living entity, the slayer, nor he who thinks it is slain, its slain is in knowledge. For the self slays not, nor is slain. What does it mean? Nayam hanti na hanyate. That means that if somebody thinks that the living entity kills, or if somebody thinks that the living entity gets killed, they are both not in knowledge. They are both in ignorance. Why? Because the self does not kill and it cannot be killed. The self is completely unattached, completely different from the body. So the self is unaffected by any of these ideologies. Therefore, Arjuna, don't think that you are engaged in killing, because one of the concerns that Arjuna had was, I am engaged in killing, I will bear the responsibilities. So Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you are also a living entity. They are also a living entity. So you cannot kill them. You are not engaged in killing. It's the material modes of nature, and Krishna further explains how these modes are actually engaged and making us do many things. We are not doing it actually. We are just experiencing. Right? We are just seeing it's happening in front of us through our conscious self. Because the matter and spirit do not mix. It's the illusion over the top of this conscious entity which makes us think that, oh, I am doing this, I am this person, I am a man, I am a woman, I am American, I am Indian, I am Chinese, I am Japanese, right? I am a fan of this club, I am a fan of that football team, that cricket team, I am this, I am that. All of these identities, I am a business student, I am an engineering student, all of these identities are given on top of the body. But the spirit being, the conscious entity, is completely differentiated from these aspects. So Krishna is saying that, Arjuna, you are not slaying them and they are not being slain. So what's happening is at the bodily platform, and Krishna further explains this, right? So the purport here explains that the embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons. It is said that the living entity within the body is not killed. It's the body that's affected. The spirit soul is so small that it is impossible to kill, right? The living entity is not killable. Why? Because of its spiritual constitution. What's killed is the body. So you don't worry, Arjuna. Right? The Vedic injunction is Ma himshat sarva bhutani. Never commit any violence to anyone. Right? That means don't kill their body. Don't kill their body. Why? Because you are impeding their journey. Nor does understanding that living entities not kill encourages animal slaughter. Right? Some people might argue, oh, if the living entity is not killed and I am not doing the killing, then I can eat animals. I can kill them, for my needs. No. Killing of somebody's body without authority is abominable, right? You need to do it under the principles of dharma. If you are doing outside the principles of dharma for your own satisfaction, that means you are punishable by the law. You will be punishable by the law of the land and punishable by the law of the supreme, that is the law of karma. So Arjuna was asked to engage in this killing on the basis of the principles of dharma, that you have to. They tried to avoid the war. The war was inevitable at that point in time. They begged to Duryodhana that Duryodhana, just give us 5 villages. We are rulers, we are Kshatriyas, we need something. Give us something. Don't play tricks with us. Don't insult our wife. Don't insult these things. Don't do any of these things. Duryodhana didn't listen. He even tried to capture Krishna. We saw in one of the first verses from the first chapter, right? That prayer by Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, Rashmi Rathi, where he talks about how Duryodhana tried to capture Krishna. So here Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that Arjuna, your killing is not equivalent to killing for gratifying the senses. Your killing is for higher principles. It is authorized. It is needed. You are here. The warriors are here. You are not doing a cold-blooded murder. You are engaged in warfare for higher principles. So Arjuna, don't worry. First of all, you are not killing them. They are not getting killed. Even if you think it's happening, the body will perish. And if you think that you will take reactions, that's not going to happen. Why? Because you're fighting on the basis of higher principles. These higher principles are enunciated in the Vedic texts, the wisdom texts. And these wisdom literature and texts tell us what is our dharma, what is our duty. And we have to understand our duty and then act accordingly. Right? We all have our psychophysical nature, our temperament. Some people are interested in academic and scholarly pursuits. Some people are interested in monetary pursuits. Some people are interested in protection and in leadership, and some people are interested in serving others. All those four kinds of people have to exist in the society, and they have to act according to the psychophysical nature that is given to them, so that they don't accumulate negative reactions, so that they're able to get rid of the reactions and ultimately come to a point of understanding their connection with the divinity. So Arjuna, you are a Kshatriya. You are meant to fight. You are meant to perform this duty. We have tried avoiding it. It's not that, we just directly jumped onto fighting. We tried avoiding it, but now it's unavoidable. It's inevitable, and you have to perform your duty. Verse number 19, verse number 20. It's a very popular verse. Verse number 20 has been used by many people over the ages, actually. It's one of the more popular verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitavana bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. I'll recite it again. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitavana bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Na, never. Jayate, takes birth. Mriyate, dies. Va, either. Kadachit, at any time, past, present or future. Na, never. Ayam, this. Bhutva, having come into being. Bhavita, will come to be. Va, or. Na, not. Bhuyaha, or is again coming to be. Ajaha, unborn. Nityaha, eternal. Shashvataha, permanent. Ayam, this. Puranaha, the oldest. Na, never. Hanyate, is killed. Hanyamane, being killed. Sharire, the body. Translation. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So Krishna is defining the characteristics of the soul, the characteristics of the conscious entity here. What is he saying? That for soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. The soul is eternal. It doesn't take birth. It's the body that takes birth. It's the body that dies. The soul remains as it is, eternal. He has not come into being, right? He does not come from something. For example, there was nothing and then suddenly it existed. No. He has not come into being in the past, does not come into being that it becomes a soul at some point, and will not come into being or will become something else. It has always remained and always existed. He is unborn. That's the nature of the soul, unborn. He is eternal, always remained eternal. It's ever existing. It always exists, no matter what happens in the world. And it's primeval. It has been existing from the time which we even are unaware of. He is not slain when the body is slain. Even when something happens to the body, nothing happens to the soul. So, Krishna is telling Arjuna, Arjuna, the soul does not take birth, does not die. It has always existed. It's primeval. It's eternal. It's unborn. It's not killed when you kill the body. So, why are you worrying? What are you worrying about? Again, we are looking at the analytical study of the Bhagavad Gita, right? The analytical way of understanding these things. We look at that until verse number 30th, and that's where it goes into the law of karma, and Krishna explains karma. So let's see what Prabhupada says here in the purport. It's quite a big purport. We'll quickly skim through it, right? What is it saying? That the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. Qualitatively, it's of the same nature. For example, if you look at a small droplet of an ocean and the entire body of ocean, qualitatively they are the same. Quantitatively there is a difference, right? But qualitatively they are exactly the same. So similarly, the small fragmental part, the small living conscious entity and the divine conscious source, they are qualitatively the same. The body goes through 6 kinds of transformations. The Vedas say that there are 6 kinds of transformations that a body goes through. Now what are these 6 kinds of transformations? It takes birth, right? It remains for some time, then it grows, then it produces some effects, then it dwindles, and then at last it vanishes into oblivion. So what are the 6 changes? Birth, existence, growth, production of effects, byproducts, dwindling, and death. These are the 6 states through which a body goes through. So the body has gone through these existence, but the soul does not go through. The soul is eternal and ever existing. Therefore, the soul does not deteriorate. We see matter, right? We see, let's look at humans. Humans take a birth from womb of the mother's body. They remain for some time, right? Then they grow, right? They grow. Then they produce some effects, right? Their body produces some effects. Their offsprings are produced. Then they gradually start dwindling, right? Their body starts falling apart, ricketting, and at last they vanish into oblivion. The body completely disappears and the soul moves on to the next. The soul does not go through these layers, these kinds of existence. Therefore, these are happening in the world. The byproducts, children are also individual souls owing to their body. So the body develops because of the soul's presence. If the soul is not present, then the body does not happen. Interestingly, there is another Vedic text called Katha Upanishad. This same verse appears in a different format. Right? Na jayate mriyate va kadachin. Here it says na jayate mriyate va vipaschin. Same idea. Then nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyah. Nayam kutaschin na babhuva kaschit. Ajo nityo shashvato yam purano. Ajo nitya shashvato yam purano. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So almost similar verse actually appears in the Kathopanishad, giving the same idea, which tells us that the Bhagavad Gita is not new. The Bhagavad Gita has been existing for ages in the Vedic texts and Vedic versions. The knowledge was existing. Krishna just happened to speak it on the battlefield in a format that was easily consumable by Arjuna and easily applicable. That's why Gita is called as the Gita Upanishad, the sum and substance of the Vedic knowledge. The sum and substance of the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic wisdom, is given in a short format, in a summarized format in the Bhagavad Gita. Some people think that the Bhagavad Gita is too big. There are 700 verses. Wait until you see the size of the Vedic canon. So, the point being that the soul is full of knowledge. The soul has always existed. The soul doesn't go through what body goes through. So, Krishna is again explaining to Arjuna that the soul is always conscious, always remains part and parcels of the Supreme, right? It's the individual soul. The consciousness is prone to be forgetful, and it's the layer of illusion that makes the soul thinks that I am the body. So therefore, here Prabhupada is explaining in the text that Arjuna, don't be affected by material desires, right? You are an atomic soul, you are forgetting your real nature. That's why you need to be enlightened by a spiritual master. So what does a guru does? What does a guru do? We are in ignorance. A guru comes with this Vedic wisdom, with this divine wisdom, and helps us get beyond this ignorant state so that we can truly understand ourselves. Going back to the entire discussion that we had the very first time, the core principle of Bhagavad Gita is self-realization. So going back to that idea of self-realization. So here, Krishna being the guru, being a bona fide representative, Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master, they appear and they teach the living entity that, hey, foolish living entity, you are suffering because you think you are the body, but you are not. You will give up this temporary existence in some days, in some years, in some months, who knows when. This body will go away, but you are a spirit soul. So understand your nature as the spirit soul and perform the duty of being that spirit soul. That's how you truly understand happiness in your eternal existence, and that's what liberation is all about, and that's what how you truly understand. So we need this knowledge. If we don't have this knowledge, then we will suffer by the happenings of the world and by our senses. Right? I don't know if you remember, but we've talked about this idea that you cannot solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. We need higher level of understanding. So to solve material problems, material solutions don't work. Material solutions end up creating more problems. We need spiritual solutions, spiritual understanding to our material problems, and that's what this is Bhagavad Gita is offering to us. That's what Krishna is telling, that Arjuna, you think you are in a material situation, but rise above this material consciousness, see it from a spiritual perspective and do your duty. Listen to me, I am your teacher, you have surrendered unto me, listen to me, listen to my instructions, so that your illusion gets dispelled and disappear. And after your illusion disappears, then you can engage in this fight and perform your duty. And then if you perform your duty in that consciousness as a spirit soul, not as the body, you won't accumulate reactions, you will understand full knowledge, you will have self-realization, and you will understand the real purpose of human life. So that's what Krishna is building up to. Anyway, as I said, we'll keep it short today. Let's look at the 3 verses that we studied today. We looked at 3 verses, Krishna's arguments. Well, let me quickly summarize. So we looked at Krishna's arguments to Arjuna. Arjuna said, I don't want to fight. It's better to beg. Krishna says that, no, you're talking like a wise person, but you are actually a fool. Why? Because you are mourning for something that is not worthy of grief. The wise do not lament for the body, nor they lament for the dead. Not for the living, nor for the dead, because they understand that the soul is never dead. The soul is eternal. It has always been that way. So if you truly understand that, then why would you worry? So you have always existed, Arjuna. You are existing and you will continue to exist. The same applies to me. The same applies to all of these. Your soul, however, the soul goes from various bodies, from boyhood to youth to old age, and then it moves to death. A sober person is not affected by such a change, right? A sober person knows that happiness and distress are like seasons. They come and they go. Therefore, they arise from your sense perception. So learn to tolerate. Right? If you learn to tolerate and if you're steady, then you become eligible for liberation, because liberation is truly a state of consciousness. You rise above your bodily consciousness and you truly situate yourself in the divine consciousness, and that's at that point you truly become liberated while living in the body. And there are examples of great personalities from the Vedic scriptures who are liberated. Then Krishna gives a reference that the sages have concluded. What have they concluded? That the body has no endurance, it dies, and the soul has never changed. The soul always remains as it is. They have studied the nature analytically of both. Therefore, Arjuna, that which is pervading the entire body, the consciousness, is actually the symptom of the soul. It is indestructible and nobody has been able to destroy. And then these are the 3 verses we looked at. So therefore the body will come to an end, but the soul is indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal. Therefore, fight. Don't worry about the body. Fight. See, look at them as spirit souls and do your duty, and then you won't be affected by this compassion that is originating in your heart. Right? If you think that you are doing the killing, the living entity, or if you think the living entity gets killed, none of that happens. The living entity cannot kill, and the living entity does not get killed. Right? Because the soul never takes birth, never dies. So therefore, it does not kill and cannot be killed. It does not come into being, has not come into being, will not come into being. Therefore, it is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. Therefore, he is not slain when the body is slain. So therefore, Arjuna, this verse, na jayate mriyate va kadachin. Therefore, Arjuna, don't worry, engage in fighting. We'll continue looking at further verses. The next further verses are again analytical study of the soul before it goes into the idea of karma, law of karma, and then it talks about Buddhi, use of intelligence. What is intelligence? How to develop this truly true intelligence, and how to be a liberated soul while even living in this body. So, to summarize, the next verses up until verse number 30th, we'll look at the analytical study of the soul. Verse number 31 to 37 will talk about performing your duty. 38 to 53 will talk about karma yoga or buddhi yoga, use of intelligence in doing your proper karma. And from verse number 54 to 72 we'll talk about the qualities of a liberated soul. What is a liberated soul, right? Even in this body they can appear. Sthita prajna, the study of the state of fixed consciousness, and what does that look like. And then we'll continue on to third chapter, which will be the specifically about karma yoga. What is exactly is karma, and how does karma applies to us. So lots of interesting things coming up. I hope you guys all of you are keeping safe and sound, and I hope to see you all soon and have personal interaction in our discussion. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Hare Krishna.